of the Bryan Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present. This workshop has been duly called, and that notice of this workshop has been posted in accordance with Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. At this time, we do not have any citizens' comments, so we will move directly down into information item 3A, teaching and learning update.
Good afternoon. This afternoon, I have a few updates for you and some discussion points that we need some input from the Board of Trustees. If you would help us out with that today. So I have three topics, the first of which is a discussion regarding fall semester final exams for grades middle school and high school for high school credit courses. Some changes have happened at the state level, then of course within the district regarding annual assessments, STAR and EOC. So previously, those were paper and pencil tests, and as we all know, the state has been moving towards all online testing. With the purchase of devices for students in grades 5 through 12, we've been able to facilitate fully online testing for STAR and EOCs, which gives us, thankfully, a lot more flexibility in when those assessments are administered. If you're to utilize the paper version, it is an assigned day by the state of Texas and is the only day you may utilize other than a makeup test. But with an online assessment, the state gives you a window of time to take that assessment. And yes, Mrs. Twain. I know it's fun, isn't it? So they allow us to have more flexibility in setting that date as a district. So we've taken advantage of that, and we've moved the EOC December testing later in that window to give our students more instructional time prior to taking that EOC assessment. For some, it's the first time. For most, it's a retest, or perhaps they were absent last year when it was administered during the pandemic, but it'll be a retest situation. So given that, and given the uniqueness of the calendar this year, if you'll notice, our fall December calendar starts with November 29th through December 3rd is the first week, and then there are only 2 full weeks in December beyond that on our calendar, with EOCs for English 1 and English 2 being the week of the 6th through the 10th, along with makeups. And then the last week of school, December 13th through 17th, U.S. History, Algebra 1, and Biology, along with those makeup assessments. Given the overlap of all of that statewide testing, it makes it very difficult to administer final exams for the same subjects in the same time frame, along with the MAP middle of the year assessment. And so the campus administration reached out along with teachers and asked that we reconsider the need for a fall semester exam for this year, especially since we've doubled up with EOCs in that same week and time frame. So I don't have it as an action item for you today, but I have it for discussion, and if the board chooses to proceed with it, we can put it on the November 15th agenda. What questions can I answer for you, or what discussion?
So to summarize,
Ma'am.
what were the three things?
The first thing is final exam. Then we're going to get into professional development day and then some changes to EIC level.
So the proposal is not doing?
Correct, to remove the final exam, and it just would calculate as a flat average of 6 weeks, first 6 weeks, second 6 weeks, and third 6 weeks.
Okay.
You know, that sounds like this huge thing for so many kids, but really, so many kids take EOC, they're taking the same type of test.
Yes, ma'am.
And so it's not really affecting that many students.
Especially when you consider the exemptions.
I wanted to send this to my granddaughter who lives up in the Dallas area. I thought, look, our kids aren't going to have to take this. Look what I got to vote on today. And then I thought, you know, that's really not that big a deal because most of the kids are taking these anyway.
The assessment learning is still
transparent. And it's tough on teachers, too, to try to coordinate all that and make it relevant without doing the same thing on 2 different tests.
Yes, ma'am.
So, yeah.
My only question would be, if the syllabus says that the final exam is worth 25, 20, whatever, they do random amounts, and so a student has gone through the 6 weeks knowing that I haven't done well and I'm depending on this final exam to pull me into passing, how do we manage that if we're just going to be reusing the same grades that they've already done poorly on?
So one of the things we have in place for core academics classes is a 6 weeks recovery grade process.
Is that Edgenuity?
Yes, ma'am, where they can earn up to a 75 in the course for that 6 weeks to replace the failing grade of that 6 weeks, which helps offset it.
So it's similar, yet not the same.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
A way to be redeemed.
As a person whose child may or may not have done Edgenuity 3 or 7 times, it's not the same.
No, ma'am.
And the level of instruction is not the same, and it doesn't prepare you for the spring if you're legitimately failing the fall, and then you Edgenuity in order to pass. It doesn't prepare you for the spring.
But would cramming everything in the last minute for a final?
No,
Suffice to do
I
the
don't think
same
so
thing.
either. I was just wanting to put it out there that there are going to be some students that are less successful if they were already, based on the syllabus that was provided to them at the beginning, counting on that final to pull it up.
Many of our teachers also offer, and per the grade guidelines are required to offer, a retest reassessment opportunity after a reteach for every major grade. And so many of our students take advantage of that along the way, but should they not, they have the opportunity to do the 6 weeks credit recovery. I'm not sure about the number of students who would be successful then on the final exam who had not been successful in one of those 2 opportunities prior to that, but we could certainly look into that.
So if you have a
I'm okay
really
with it.
gung-ho kid, like she's talking about, that in the near future, I mean, it's almost a given that this would pass, and teachers start letting them know about it, then they can really start using that brain that's in there between now and the end of the semester time to bring that average up to as high as they can. If it's above a 75, then they're okay. If it's below a 75, then do they have the option? Well, if it's a 71 to a 75, I guess,
They're still okay.
yeah.
But they do have the option
But
to recoup up to a 75.
That's what I started saying.
Yes, ma'am.
So if they want to bring a 71 up to a 75, so actually they would have 2 options. Yeah. And so is this something we might be going to in the future? Because she's right. I mean, it is only fair for us, for the teachers too, to hand their syllabus out with the correct dates and times and info, percentages on there. What are your thoughts about the future?
I think for that, we need to convene a group of teachers and administrators. I would say the feedback we've gotten thus far is that it doesn't necessarily impact the way we had thought it had historically in terms of keeping a final exam at the semester. I think we've also talked that many universities are even doing away with the final exam process and instead moving to more application-based outcomes and projects to demonstrate learning and mastery of learning. And that certainly could be a part of the proposed grading guidelines in the future. There's still interest right now at the campus level in keeping it for the spring semester. The timelines do not overlap as significantly as they do in December. So still giving them the opportunity to have those exams. Final exams obviously originated prior to annualized state assessments that also covered the same material. And so they've coexisted for a while, but in this instance, they are impacting the timeline significantly where students will be testing every day of those weeks in December.
So is this us saying, no, you can't have a final? Or is this us saying, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. Or is this us saying the teacher has the option to not provide or require a final?
It would be across the board that there would not be final exams. However, what happened last year, many districts or many campus teachers still administered a final exam, and it could replace your lowest major
Yeah,
grade.
that's, okay. All right, I'm good with that. Thank you.
I know it seems like a lot of talk over this, but this is a big deal.
It
to
is.
kids and teachers, though.
Yes.
Well, so-
Parents too.
So we do have, again, some of y'all know way more about this than I do, but the ones that aren't doing these, the EOC retesting, and so not everybody's doing that, right? So,
Correct.
so why is it important not to have finals in
Sure.
the other student?
That's a very good question. So what happens when they have to run the exam schedule for EOCs, teachers are pulled from classrooms to administer those exams, which means they're not instructing their classroom, which means students aren't learning in the other classrooms either.
And you did say, you mentioned feedback, so this has gone out to the teachers and there hasn't been any significant pushback on it?
Teachers are asking us to consider it.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the only other group I would say if we're thinking about doing this future is not just teachers and administrators, but also students. I think their voice should be heard too in that. I really doubt they're going to be upset by not having
I'm
a
yes, ma'am.
final exam, but you never know. I might be surprised.
I don't know. Fran's kids might be the ones that say, we gotta have final exams.
Our issues are now at Sam Houston. We're good here.
All right, if it's all right with the board, then I'll bring that back for consideration at the night meeting later this month. Okay, my second topic involves the school calendar, and it is on the agenda in the event the board would like to move forward with it today. And it involves November the 19th. As we've been out on campuses talking with teachers, Mrs. Carabine's been out with Snacks with the Soup. We've had lots of walking, talking feedback, anecdotally and very directly from teachers and administrators. And the overwhelming sense is this is year 3 of the pandemic, and it's still incredibly challenging and very difficult. That coupled with reading academies at the elementary level, that's taking every conceivable moment, and they are, by the way, so incredibly grateful to this Board of Trustees for building that into the calendar. I don't know how they would survive in this moment if all of that were at home and on their own. So they are incredibly grateful to this board for those additional PD days. But the request has come to Central Administration that we change the November 19th date from a half-day early release to a full-day PD, because right now at the elementary level in particular, all they're able to do is read an academy from dawn to dusk, and then some more. Further, they have been incredibly diligent in their work with House Bill 4545. That was passed this last legislative session, which basically has a process of not only the required intervention time for students, but also the documentation of the intervention, which has layered on an additional responsibility of significant magnitude to every campus across the district, every teacher, every administrator. Additionally, the high school campuses would like to use that time for final prep for that home stretch of the EOC testing that we were just discussing, to making sure they have everything in place. We, again, push those EOCs later to the window to give us more instructional time with students, and they want to be smart with their time. And so in looking at the historical attendance trends for those dates, it is a noticeable decline on the day before a holiday, from a half day to a full day, is what the request would be from campus and district administration. Dr. Merrill and some others have also reached out to the local child care providers to see if they had availability. Alpha Best will run a full day for us on that date. And we've also reached out to the Boys and Girls Club and some other entities and trying to work with them that in the event we move forward with this, would there be additional daycare opportunities for the children who needed it. Obviously, with the timeline, ideally, we would discuss it and take action today if we were going to move forward, just to make sure we have plenty of communication time to families, since the next meeting isn't until November the 15th.
I don't see a motion on that.
It's actually down later in the agenda, under 5B1. That's where we're at.
We're
I think,
still-
Barbara, this did come up on the calendar committee for the next year's calendar. And there were a lot of parents there that this was one of their concerns, were those half days that we had set in place. A lot of them did see the issue, not so much of the staff, but it was the parents saying how the half day really doesn't work for a lot of them as far as the daycare, as far as they're still having to work. And some of the parents were concerned that the high school kids, some of them that had high school kids, made the comments that it was only half a day, there was no need to go to school. So there was a lot of concern on that for the upcoming calendar. So I know a lot of parents would be happy to see this for an all day instead of a half day.
We do have a number of instructional minutes still remaining, and there'd be no concerns in that sense with making up days pending any bad weather events. The closest would be Bryan Collegiate. We would still have 3 remaining bad weather days left on the books.
So do we want to deal with that later in the agenda?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
We
Okay.
can, we will just, and just note that collegiate is right there following it. With it.
The last item we have for you is an update to Board Policy EIC Local, and I've asked Mrs. Willett to come and speak on behalf of those changes.
Good afternoon. EIC Local is that policy that we use for rank and class for high school students. This update would allow us to include additional courses at that honors level. Currently, only courses that are under the core level, English, Math, Science, Social Studies, and then World Languages, are included in that ranked GPA. If you remember last year, I came about this time to add in additional courses that we are teaching out at CTech in that industrial engineering pathway. That's a very advanced pathway. And we had to go in and add those course names individually. This updated language would allow us to add in additional courses at the honors level once there's agreement upon the group that these are courses that need to be at that level without having to come back if they're not in those core areas or in world languages, without having to come back each time and add individual courses. The urgency at this point is the plan is to add an additional program next year through Career Tech. It's a biomedical sciences pathway that utilizes the Project Lead the Way curriculum. And so we would phase that in each year. So next year we would offer that freshman course and then build that program subsequently over the next 4 years, but to allow that curriculum to, because that curriculum is so rigorous, to be at the honors level. The paragraph that's within EIC Local on page 1 that I added in is something that we would put in and then eventually would phase out the paragraph that would be above it because it would take the place of that. But because we're phasing it in by cohort groups, the other 2 paragraphs would stay there at this point. And then there's one little minor adjustment on the top of page 2 with the dual credit. After working with TASB, they suggested that we clarify the language because all dual credit courses may not be at that advanced level. We have a number of courses that are offered as technical dual credit. And then we have a number of students that attend and take classes in the summer. And so this specifies that we will list the courses that students are taking for dual credit, in the handbook, on the website to make sure students know exactly which courses are included in that ranked GPA.
Would this include the theater class?
That one is still up for discussion. We are working on that right now. At this point, it does not.
So this wouldn't, when would this go into effect? So I see 2025 graduates, so.
This page, this additional, we would start it with this incoming cohort for these additional courses through like CTech would come through these incoming freshmen. So it would be cohort 2026 is where we would start these additional courses.
Okay.
Do you have any idea of what's kind of common among other districts in this regard?
We have gone through a couple of different revisions with rank and GPA as we've gone through the years. When we did this one, original EIC about 5 or 6 years ago, and maybe it was 8 now, I don't remember. We researched a lot of districts across the state. We each had our little, you do these 3 districts, you do 3. We tried to use ones that were comparable and larger than us, and it really varies, Mr. Stasny. Obviously, everybody includes the 4 core and those world languages, but as to whether or not other content areas are included, it varies from district to district.
Well, the only reason I ask is I know for some folks this is a really big deal, and I think it's, at first I was concerned that it was going to be impacting students that were already going to be affected, but again, since it doesn't start till For freshmen, right.
these incoming freshmen, and we would
That
add it in
certainly
from
gives
there.
everybody advance notice, and that's going to go over a lot better, so, thank you.
Yes, sir.
It also improves the that's a hard word, rigorousness of those courses.
Yes.
And as a parent, knowing that my child selected that, then I would know going into it that he had a hard road ahead of him. Man,
Hard
yeah, just talking on this kind of level is giving me the heebie-jeebies, but that's good as for ed, because I know those are tough courses. I mean, they have to be.
Yes.
So,
The expectations will be high.
My daughter's going to be a ninth grader next year, and she is super excited about the biomedical pathway. She is very excited, so it's going to be an interesting group of kids that start off on this pathway with CTE team.
I do have vague memories where kids were just refusing to take certain courses because they were not going to count enough on their GPA. And so even though it was really a great course, I'm not taking that because it's going to affect my.
And you brought back, that is why we did what we did years ago. There were lots of stories of students that were leaving the fine arts programs or leaving things that were counting at a regular level because it was negatively impacting their GPA. And that was kind of the reason we did what we did. And Dr. Harlan, I have an answer to your question. I had to process a little bit. It does not count at the ranked level. And that is the reason why we wrote it the way we did. And again, history, and I'm old and been here a long time. When we're talking about dual credit, that was a conversation that any course a student chose to take, dual credit, should be ranked at a 6.0. But the decision was made years ago because of the economic status of many of our students in advanced programs. It became very difficult to make the determination of this kid can take an additional dual credit course if they choose to, this one cannot financially. And so when we set the guidelines of these are the courses, we only included them if there was something that was being taught at the campus at the same level. The example is juniors taking U.S. History 1301, 1302. They can take AP. So if they take U.S. History, it's going to cost them $600+ at Blinn. They can take AP at the campus, take the AP exam, and have the exact same results for a much less cost. And so we put it in as a process of including it if a student had an option to take an advanced course at the campus level.
Yeah, because otherwise it ends up being this, where students are taking dual credit to pad, per se, their GPA, and they have the financial opportunity to do that where others do, so.
it's really neat having somebody on the board like Julie who sees that from up here, looking down at the university level, accepting students with these type of situations. And I listen when Julie speaks.
Aw.
I listen.
As
About-
opposed to the rest of us.
Are there any other questions? Then the hope with this would be on the consent agenda for the next meeting in November.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is discuss possibilities for the transportation and maintenance site facility.
Okay, so this has been a topic that's been brought up to the Bond Oversight Committee, and we discussed it at a recent Finance Committee meeting as well. But when we started planning out the rest of these bond projects with the architect's firm, what we started seeing is with CDC and CDC Annex, our central distribution center at Tabor and Highway 6, that we are going to have quite a few $1 million in projects there, and is it worth the time to look into the maintenance and transportation project and adding those two structures into this project as well versus dumping a few $1 million into their current facilities? So that's what we're bringing to y'all today, is just consideration on that. This is not an action item or anything, but just to kind of answer any questions and kind of get some guidance on what to move forward with this, because since we are bringing transportation and maintenance back into this design phase here within the next week. Like I said, just consider a possibility of including those two buildings at the proposed site for maintenance and transportation. Currently, the CDC and CDC Annex, kind of a information on those two buildings. CDC houses our school nutrition, Alpha Best, as well as our warehouse group. And then the Annex has our custodial, print shop, and records located there. They're both pre-engineered metal buildings with average lifespans of 40 to 50 years. The Annex is a fairly recent build, built in 2002, whereas the CDC facility was built somewhere around 1985. We're not 100% sure. It was prior to us taking ownership of the building. But Google Earth goes back to about 1985, and it was there. And there's 1985s listed on the appraisal district's website as well. So CDC does have a facility condition index of 71%, and the Annex is 55. With the FCI, the facility condition index, anything over 60 is deemed to start looking at replacement, and 55 is considered average. So the original plan through bond steering was to take care of all the priority 1 projects in our facility assessment, as well as the priority 2 MEP items, which are the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing trades. So with that, we had about a little over $5.7 million project just for the ones in the priority 2 MEPs. If we looked at all of the items for this, for these two buildings, the priority 1s through 4s, which there weren't 4s in the assessment, there were 1s, 2s, and 3s. We were just under 6.9 million, and PBK, being the architect for the maintenance and transportation facility, did a quick ballpark estimate of 9.7 million to build what's currently at CDC Annex on the maintenance transportation site. This number does include soft costs of 20%, and I have talked to Mr. Ron Bailey about it. Those soft costs, we can probably take those down to anywhere from 10 to 15% versus the full 20, just because maintenance and transportation is already encompassing some of these soft costs on its own, and they won't be duplicated with some of the geotechnical reports and site studies and everything. Then you have commissioning and materials testing, where maintenance transportation is going to take up all of those already, so it's going to be minimal additions for those. And then, like I mentioned on the previous one, the 71% and the 55 with 55, well, I said average, was good condition, and 60 plus was poor, and look at replacements. So the projects that are encompassed by the 2020 bond, the priority 1s are listed there with CDC, and if they're going to be at the CDC or the Annex or at both of them. And some of the big ones are the replacing the metal walls and re-insulating the CDC building. Those are starting to deteriorate pretty quickly in lots of areas. There's pavement repairs at both. The electrical services, it's not a priority 1 at CDC, but it is a priority 2, and those are in desperate need of replacement. The freezer cooler needs to be replaced and enlarged. The trick is we don't know right now if we can enlarge it due to the space that is allocated for that freezer cooler currently at the CDC, which that would come into, when we start the design of that project, we would look into that, but there are some questions on whether or not it could actually be enlarged. We could replace it, maybe not enlarge it. And then adding a fire sprinkler system, school nutrition has requested a security vestibule during the update to the facility assessment in 2019, and that was given a priority 1. Then priority 2, the MEP items. The overlay existing metal roof is not an MEP, but it was listed as a priority 2 to be taken care of at the CDC annex. But all of the HVAC would need to be replaced or expanded on, depending on which building it is, because there is quite a large square footage in the CDC that does not have HVAC, and it is slated to become climate controlled. And then providing controls and everything in the CDC building.
Well, before you keep going, I'm trying to make sure I don't get too confused here. This is all included in what was on the previous page about the expenses of renovating these buildings,
Yes.
or not?
Yes.
Okay.
That $5,729,859
That's where that comes from?
is
Okay.
where is
All right.
the totals from that. Yes, sir.
What's the roof status of the main building?
I don't know if it was fully replaced, but it was repaired about, I believe it was 6 to 7 years ago on the main building.
So there's not any current major concerns about that roof?
On the main building, the main CDC building, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, well, that's one of those things that I'm trying to compare these two ideas. I mean, obviously, I'd want to know if, now we got to replace the roof in 5 years, or expectation is because it was replaced, it's not that far in the past that it's predicted to last for a very long time. I mean, those are the kind of things that I think we all need to know. And I'll just tell you where I'm headed. I know I kind of interrupted you here, but I need to know if we spend this money. Obviously, yes, it's an old building, but is it an old building that has now been renovated to the point that it's going to last a very long time? If buildings just fall apart at a certain age, then we wouldn't be in this building right now, obviously, because it's way older than these. So I'm just asking these questions because that's, to me, a very important question is yes, we can say, oh, well, now it's an old building and we put a bunch, I think you used the word dump money into it, but I mean, if we're really bringing it up to a high level, that's going to last a long time, and that's what the architects and contractors are going to tell us, then that's a very important part of the decision, because it is obviously less expensive. So anyway, that's a long speech that I could have saved for the end, but I do want to hear more about that.
Right, no, and I have a slide coming up that has has issues with the building that weren't in the facility assessment that maintenance is dealing with on a fairly consistent basis. One of those is the foundation had repairs in, I believe we looked it up in 2002, and it is showing more signs of damage to the foundation than what was repaired then. So we're having ongoing foundation issues as well now over there. That was not included in this assessment.
Are we going to get that evaluated?
Depending on how this project goes. If it is determined to not do these projects and move CDC Annex to the maintenance transportation project, more than likely no. If we decide to keep CDC Annex where it is and do these projects, then yes, we would have a structural engineer come in and do an evaluation and see what would need to be done.
Well, once again, I don't know what that's going to cost, but that's important to at least my decision about whether we move it or not, as to whether, I don't want to sink all that money into it and then do the evaluation and find out there's a major problem with it. I want to know beforehand.
Right.
So that we know where we stand with regard to the existing building.
Okay.
So
we
when,
will,
when you say move it out to the maintenance and transportation, are we talking about adding a floor? Or are we talking about a whole separate building?
it would be, no, not adding a floor. It would be, right now, there are site plans on the end of this one that PBK has done to see how it would look, how it would work. And they are all of the options on these site plans are separate buildings. We could incorporate it into the existing and add square footage, but it would not add a floor or anything.
No, I wasn't trying to steal your thunder or ruin your presentation.
No, not at all.
I remember us looking at the site plans of that building, and I don't remember seeing a place that would absorb this, so I wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that we weren't absorbing.
No, we would add square footage onto the current project, just not we would not go up, we would just add more square footage.
Okay.
I think we're all kind of getting, or we haven't let you finish your presentation, but I've been in both these buildings a gazillion times, and DAEP was in the annex building at one
Yes.
point in time back in the early 90s.
I have been told that, yeah.
And so that was one reason I was in there a whole bunch of times, not as a student. But anyway, so what I envision is how well these two, what's housed in these, work along with what we're moving with maintenance and transportation, because there's so much interchange between these buildings across the
Yes.
highway from each other. Because distribution used to be over where maintenance and transportation is now. And so they were hauling, anyway, they didn't have to go across the highway and get what they were getting and then haul it off. So as I think in my mind, I can see the advantage of having all of this under one roof. And it actually went through my mind why we didn't do this when we were making these plans in the first place.
Right.
But my question that might help is, what would we do with these buildings, like what David was asking monetarily? Would we make up some of the difference with what we do with these two buildings if we did indeed move them with the other groups, which I think would be a good move for everybody, for the personnel and what they need with each other, and knowing how the flow of those two groups work together. But could we make up some of the difference with either the utilization of those two buildings by other of our groups or selling them? Have y'all thought about that yet? Because that would help, again, long-term, like David was talking about. He's thinking way down the line.
No, correct. And we have looked into those efficiencies as well and that has been brought up with CDC and CDC Annex currently, that custodial, because there was talk with Mr. Ron Clary coming on board and now having custodial under his area of, do we move custodial with him only to the maintenance transportation? But after talking with them, custodial so Annex and CDC have to go together, custodial and warehouse, because they have extremely lot of interchanging with all of their equipment and supplies.
Right.
But as regards to the future of this building, I'll let Mr. Besaw.
Well, and
Look at that way.
I'm not trying to get ahead, but I think I did.
Yeah, and that has been talked about a little bit. And if we did decide to go, the route of moving them all together, putting them in the new facility, what would we do with that? Existing facility, and of course, we'd have to evaluate what would we use it for, if we kept it, or would we sell it, and try to move it, which, that has issues of its own, but it is a pretty prime corner spot, but we, at this point, have not inquired. We could do that just to see if there's, seems like there's a market out there, and what potentially that might bring. If we were to sell it, that would help offset the additional costs of that as well.
Well, and you may be getting to this, because we did interrupt you. But the part I'm not hearing at this point is, how many people are in these buildings, and how is what they do connected to what the other building does? I mean, I need to know, I need to understand that a little more. I mean, and I think it's certainly appropriate for us to think about, it costs a lot to renovate these buildings, do we just need to build new ones? But, thinking through long-term, I mean, we can't keep dipping into fund balance to offset things that, oh, this is a great opportunity. I need the justification for why we need to do this, I guess, is my point.
Total number of employees over there, I'm probably guessing there's probably around 20 to 25 total employees. There's, just kind of thinking with school nutrition has probably 7 to 10 that are stationed there. Then you have another 4 to 5 with warehouse, maybe more than that. Alpha Best, I have no idea how many are in the office there at Alpha Best. I wouldn't think more than 2.
And are they our employees, or we just give them space?
That I don't know.
We actually rent them space. So
Okay.
they're,
So they're
they
paid.
provide our after-school care, but we rent them that space. So we're not sure, would we move them to, station them somewhere else, or would they go? That would have to be decided, but.
Yeah. And so on the warehouse part, are we talking about putting HVAC in the whole warehouse, or part of it, or?
Yes, in a vast majority of it to all of it. Maybe not full-blown HVAC everywhere, but at least heat, because currently there is neither in there. And they do have obstacles with storage in that building, with the, go to the next slide, with some of the maintenance issues, what they brought up, the height of the building, not adequate for storage. It is a sloping roof building, so as you go to the edges of it, it does slope down, and they lose quite a bit of storage space on their top
And
rows of storage because of that.
maybe it's just my ignorance. What are we storing?
District supplies,
Yeah,
Paper,
Right.
materials that teachers need, art materials, staplers.
Well, I mean, I
a lot of-
asked
everything
because-
not maintenance.
Yeah.
Well, I asked because, I mean, there's two different, ways to handle this. Either you buy a whole bunch of stuff in bulk and you pay to store it, or you buy things as you need it and don't store it. So I don't know what our model is. It sounds like we buy a lot of things and store
I
it.
think it's a little of both.
And I can interject on that because we just talked about it, and I think most districts are moving away from that whole notion of buying a lot of stock and then having to store it because things are readily available. Of course, we have a supply chain disruption right now that's wreaking havoc with that theory, but those are the very things we're looking at, and we would not want to heat or cool a large amount of space if it's not warranted. But if it's the nursing materials or paper or anything that's temperature sensitive, that would be what we would target. And I know Ms. Waller mentioned just putting people together so that like professions are able to leverage the facility. So having maintenance and operations under the same roof does make sense because it would be the custodial and that whole crew as well. If we moved over to the new facility, then we could maximize the use of training rooms, meeting rooms, restrooms, things like that. There could be a lot of shared space so that they could work with the other maintenance and operations team there. But these are all good questions. And Mr. Bisall, did you want to add anything to the people who house there and their particular needs?
Yeah, I mean, that, we really covered it. Then you just have in the annex, you have the custodial, and then the print shop area, which is that would be the supervisor and the assistant and a secretary, I think, so 3 or 4 for that. And then the print shop is another 3 people with the print machines and those kind of things. So that's pretty much the entire amount of the staff that is actually housed there.
And
I
records.
think what I'm suggesting
and Rec 1
is
for
that
records, yeah.
maybe I'm fine with doing whatever we decide to do, but perhaps thinking through the big picture stuff of, do we need what we have out there? Can we change models? Is it efficient and effective to build another warehouse when we may not want to be storing a lot of things anymore? I mean, I know that school districts over time have changed how they do things, so this is a prime opportunity for us to think about how we're going to do business in the future. I'm not suggesting we, get rid of any positions or anything like that, but building space is expensive.
Right.
So,
And Kevin, didn't we talk once before it came up? I don't know, David, you remember, we talked about when we got to this point that we would have to start consolidating a lot of people, because I understand nobody wants to be in a building with anybody, because then somebody's watching you come and go and whatever you're doing, but I thought we talked about one time that when we get ready to move transportation and all those people, we were gonna put everybody, try to get everybody at one place. And we were having problems at one time, it came up with the print shop, that we were just way out of line there. And that's when the conversation came up that instead of everybody being so spread out, everybody be together. So now here we're building maintenance transportation, and it's not like we don't have any room for anybody else to go there. And so the money that we spend to repair these buildings, we've already bought a building that we could put there to put these people in to try to consolidate everybody being together. That might not be what they like and they want, but it saves on transportation for people having to go to these areas, saves on utilities, all of that. And I think that was the discussion that we had, because we've been spending a lot of money. I remember fixing these buildings up over, this isn't the first time we've done this, that I recall since I've been on the board. We've been putting a lot of money into these buildings, and we're pitching and patching, and that's costing us a lot to pitch and patch. We've been built by new now, I think. I'm just saying, I don't remember. David, do you remember? You don't remember, you don't forget anything about money. I know you don't forget anything
Well,
about money.
I'm all about spending money when it's a good idea. It's just a question of whether it's a good idea. And this is actually the first I've heard about how these would interact with each other to any significant degree. It wasn't my understanding that they were necessarily interacting that much. What's going on at the warehouse and the other folks, but it sounds like there is some interaction. So that's obviously got to be a factor. There's also the issue of the footprint at the new site, and is that still going to leave room for, we thought we might be using it for a school possibly, is how's that going to affect that footprint? Because I wouldn't want to do, go ahead, oh yeah, let's move everything, and then, oh, whoops, now we don't have enough room for a school over here, and we really need a place for a school. So I guess we haven't gotten to that, and maybe that's coming up. So there are lots of complicated issues here. I assumed that there was a lot of going in and out to the schools from the, what's it called, CD what?
The CDC.
Well, anyway, and that obviously that location, one reason it's such a good location for other purposes like even selling it is because it's a lot more accessible, I would say, to the majority of our schools, with both high schools over on that side of town as opposed to where the new site is. I don't know if that's a factor or not. Is that going to be inconvenient to, because it seems like there's lots of going back and forth between the schools and that facility. Has anybody looked at that? If it's not a big deal, it's not a big deal, but that ought to be considered. So lots of things going on here, and it all needs to be brought into play, including what I said earlier about we certainly don't want to put a bunch of money into something and find out, oops, the foundation's falling apart, so now we got to spend $2 million trying to fix the foundation. Of course we wouldn't want to do that. I'm just taking a break.
I can envision tell me, or maybe explain to everyone, or this might be something we have you do. First of all, I think it would be good if there was a visualization of when the board sees a building, they see print shop, storage, distribution, food, nutrition. They see which building houses what, how trucks come in and load. Okay, and that leads me to how much of maintenance in transportation take vehicles, go over there, load them up, and then take them out? Because there isn't their own fleet over in these two buildings, is there?
They do have a few of their own vehicles that they utilize and make deliveries to campuses. around the district.
So is there any sharing of vehicles? I mean, I understand if they need to be worked on.
Sharing, no, but with being worked on, anything like that, it would have to go over to this other site for any type of maintenance for fuel. So it would be across town from the fuel station
Yeah,
for the
'cause-
district and everything else.
And I was just trying to think of any of the vehicle usage that is very convenient now, other than them having to go across Highway 6 and Tabor.
Right.
But how inconvenient it would be. And these are the money thoughts, and I'm the utilization thoughts today. And how inconvenient it's going to be if we leave things the way they are, and any of our fleet or gas or anything has to be taken care of on one side of the city to the other.
Right. So in regards to like a schematic design, no, we haven't even gone down the path of schematic design and putting that work on.
Oh, I was talking about the existing, like if they saw the CDC building, then annex, what was in the annex, what was in CDC, and just a brief little summary.
Oh, okay, what the current layout of the
I
current
can
building
see it in
is.
my mind.
Like a
but-
floor plan of the current
Right,
facilities.
of what we're talking
And Mr.
about.
Buckner, maybe you want to advance to those slides, because I know you have some photos, and you can
yes.
give them some idea of what we have that is existing. And
Yeah.
to remind everyone, with the original design and development of maintenance and transportation, we have that. We were far along in that process. So if we decided to incorporate this new CDC and CDC annex into it, we would go back and start making those adjustments and then come back in here. But maybe walk them through just very briefly some of these photos and where we have things located.
So if you look at the building on my left with the Bryan ISD central distribution, the far right of that building is school nutrition. And that houses their director, I think they have 2 or 3 assistant directors, some receptionists and some others in there. There's probably, I think 6, 7 people that are school nutrition there at.
Right, on that
This
side, yeah, I
location.
think there's 7 people in that.
And in there, they do have a little training facility, little conference room that Ms. Fryber will have some of her kitchen staff over, particularly the kitchen managers, over for training. But it is, when they are there, it is a full tight space. And they do get a lot of parental traffic into their building, which is why of their request for a security vestibule. There in the middle of the building is pretty much all of warehouse space. There is an office right to the left of the B in BISD. That was when Jeff Windsor was here. That was his office with construction. And then on the far left of the building is where Alpha Best is located. And then the warehouse is a just large open area with the freezer cooler, and it does have a wall that separates another portion of their warehouse as well. And they are currently utilizing Mr. Windsor's former office as their climate-controlled storage for the antibacterial solutions, since it does contain high amounts of alcohol, to keep those in climate control just for flammability reasons.
That and the nursing
Yeah.
things and the PPE and that kind of stuff is stored in that climate control.
And then the rear of the building you see on the right side is they have 3 loading docks back there, and then the bottom right picture is just a picture of their service panels, and you can see the different areas that have been the metal panels that have been patched by the change in colors of those metal panels from a dark brown color to a more of a tannish color. And then inside, you can see, it doesn't really show any of the layout, but you can see some of the issues we're having with the jumble of wires and cables
Well, that
and
doesn't look
phone
safe at
system on the
all.
left. It's mostly phone, so it's not voltage or anything, but it is a mess. Panels are located in wrong areas for the warehouse crew with being in the way of their forklifts and equipment. And they can't add any more equipment over there because there is no more room in their panels or in their electrical service for more equipment and more battery charging. And you can see with the sunlight at the bottom with, there are areas that are in more need of repair than others. But with the type of metal panels that are on this building, by the time you get to the areas that need to be replaced, you should just replace all, because you can't just take one panel out. You've got to go all the way around till you get to the damaged panels. And there are quite a few damaged panels that have been either filled in with foam or something to try and keep animals and critters out, because they do have a history of different animals coming into the building with them. Then that's a picture of their panels, and then the loading dock. The loading dock is having, Mr. Bennett out there was explaining to me how they're having some significant concrete issues around the loading dock area that will need to be addressed. And then in the CDC annex, when you go in the main door there is on the bottom right is kind of their equipment storage, as well as the assistant supervisor. I'm not familiar what his exact title is, but they do have 2 employees in there. One is a gentleman who repairs their equipment, and the other one is the assistant supervisor for the district, right underneath Rick Scott. And then to the right, on the right side of that hallway, is their break room / electrical room / time clock / uniform storage, all kind of in that same area together. And there's records right past this one, and then in the back of that is the print shop. And I guess I didn't have that picture in there. And you can tell print shop at one time was house for something else, because it still has like the overhead exhaust fans that you would see in a kitchen type setting or something. So the utilization doesn't really set up for what it is used as now. There is lots of multi-use spaces that may or may not should be going together anymore. And then there is in the back with print shop, along with all of their equipment, they do have somewhat of a storage room for their papers and everything that they store for printing. And then I believe I'm not sure what is stored in the portable on the side. I don't know if that's some of our records.
Yeah, I believe that's records on there. So that's where there's one person that works in the portable that is working on records. So.
And that's like records. I mean, that's valuable student information.
Yeah, but my question is, why aren't these things
There?
digitized and stored somewhere?
We're getting there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's get them a little later.
Next-
Yeah.
next question.
Okay, perfect.
So thus the need, right.
Yes.
And then this is the site of the future transportation and maintenance. I know it's not as, it may be a little hard to see, but in the left upper, PBK makes fun of me because I refer to it as 2 boxes, but the left upper box that is proposed maintenance and transportation, with the front of that building facing Harvey Mitchell 2818. And then the buses being in the rear of that. There is, if you look to the right of that building, you see the 3 black lines that run parallel with the green line.
Mm-hmm.
That is a proposed street that is part of the future growth of the city of Bryan. And that street will need to be incorporated into this site. So it will split we can change how it goes through the site, but it is going to be in the site some way, somehow. And then as you see in that box to the right, you see the faint outline of another building. That was a proposed CDC, the CDC annex in one building, with it being separated from the main building.
And to get you a pointer, we haven't bought you a pointer?
Well.
Oh, there you go. Good.
But I can only show this one and no one can see right here in front of me,
okay.
except for
Yes, but
everyone
we
behind
know
me.
you're doing it. Excellent job.
Or, that's the road
There we go.
right there, and this right here would be the CDC annex.
Can you see it,
Okay.
David?
And
Okay.
in this option.
Well, I thought that's what he was talking about. I wasn't sure.
And then in the second option, we have the front of transportation maintenance facing Leonard Road with the buses behind it. And then the fuel station would be right here behind the buses. And CDC annex could be right here between, there's two bodies of water down here, two ponds. And then that would leave the lower portion of this property completely open for any type of future growth or anything we wanted to put there. And then option C is basically the same thing as B, except that building is flipped. The main building is flipped and it faces the new City of Bryant Street that will go down to a subdivision closer to the Expo Center.
Do we know projection on that road, like when that will be happening?
Going through the different site plans that Blinn College had, they had it incorporated into their design, so it kind of seems that it is a matter of when this site gets developed, that roadway would get put in.
Yeah, my point is, if we build the building facing a road that doesn't exist, that
At this point, yeah.
makes it awkward for us, like
Right.
getting.
Well, we do have, in all of our site plans, whether the city has the road in there or not, we do have a drive going out to 2818 right there. So whether that street's there or not, we would have a drive that it would face that would go to 2818 for multiple entries and exits from there versus just Leonard Road. And with this one, the fuel station would be located, what's the pointer, right there on Leonard Road. And their PBK has, since the option for a school was brought up earlier, PBK does have a plan where having transportation maintenance and the potential of a CDC annex on the upper portion of the property, that there was a site plan that shows a school being able to be built on the lower portion and fitting. And it was a middle school that was, that they put in to show a stadium and everything else that goes along with the middle school. But of course, on that site, this right here, that easement, bare ground looking, that is a water easement.
Is that a creek?
No, it's a high-pressure water line to A&M. It's A&M's easement for a water line that goes to their main campus.
Is it above ground?
No, it's under.
Where is that? I don't,
It's the,
The thing that looks
basically, it looks like a road
oh,
right there.
okay, yeah.
A&M.
Yeah, they have an easement there, and we can't build a building on top, but we can put a drive or a road on top of it, just not a building.
I think we've.
And then
Questions you
tomorrow,
have.
I had forgotten, I do have a meeting with PBK to walk this site on Wednesday, the CDC annex, to get more information on. And I will be sure to bring up to them these foundation issues, because
Thank you.
they aren't aware of the foundation issues either that maintenance has gotten to me on. So, but it will be looked at.
Thank
I forgot I had that meeting with them on Wednesday.
I appreciate you bringing those pictures because I didn't realize that it looked as bad as it looks.
Yeah, those buildings have been utilized to the max ever since we moved into them.
And I think the records show we took ownership of that site, I believe, in 1989.
Well, but that's, not to belabor it, but that's what the price tag is to fix all of that. And the question is then what do we have if we did spend the money on it? There's a lot of other issues that are all interplaying here, obviously, and it may be best to do a new building, but until the unattractiveness of those walls was mostly because it's some old foam there, which is not in and of itself that big a deal. They're going to replace the metal walls anyway, so that's all going to be gone if it was renovated. So anyway, I don't like to ever think of a building as, okay, it's old, so it's obviously, we need to tear it down or it's not worth fixing, because that would apply to thousands and thousands of buildings still in use today from all over this state and nation. That's just the way it is that you can tear things down or you can renovate them, and sometimes that's a really good idea, and sometimes it's not. So that's what we're trying to find out.
No, and the main reason this was all brought up was just because the rebuild number and the repairs numbers were getting fairly close to each other.
Understand.
And it was, do we want to do this now versus put the money into it and then decide in 5 years or 6, 7, however many it is, that, oh, now we need to move this over there. And then it's more expensive because then it's new fees. Then I've got to do a lot of these soft costs over for that area. So it's just kind of looking at that now, since we are putting this money into the building during the 2020 bond, of do we want to consider this or just keep
I
it?
think it's worth looking at and
Right.
exploring and getting down to, because some of the issues that I see isn't just that it's an older building. I do think there's a big difference between a building that was built in the 1930s and the 1920s and one that was built in the 1980s. At least my grandpa, who built buildings in the 1930s, would tell you that there's a big difference. But at the same time, really it becomes, you may not have to, you do outgrow buildings at certain times. And so when we start looking at freezers, when we start looking at how do we, then the questions become, can you free up space to put in a new freezer that's going to sustain and take us forward? And but I do think it's worth looking at, definitely.
Miss Sunday, in nutrition, I guess since I've been on the board, she's been asking for anything for help, for more space, newer freezers and equipment, but more training space. And now, she's a big part of this, so.
And the thought would be that the big training space that is in the transportation maintenance building that is suitable enough for transportation, which is one of the larger departments of the district, that school nutrition could also utilize that as well. Granted, they could if they were across town too. It's just the back and forth over there.
And this isn't a sell on what we're talking about, but as of March of 19, can you imagine how many meetings our nutrition staff had to have to punt and change directions on the way we fed kids? And then we fed kids all summer, and how many times she had to call her group together. And I'm sure she didn't have room to have them all in one space. So, I don't know.
Okay, well, thank you for the information and sharing it with the board. I foresee us probably having additional conversations. You can come back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have several questions to answer, so we'll get back to that.
Okay, great. All All right, next up is item 4, a consent agenda.
I move approval of all the items listed on the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Harland, a second by Ms. Dwayne. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries as moved. And that will move us down into the regular agenda, starting with consider approval of the school leaders liability insurance annual renewal.
Yes, thank you, Mr. McCall. This is an annual renewal for the school leaders liability insurance. At the present time, it expires November 30. And so the renewal that was requested, we did a request for proposal and just posted and advertised it. Also reached out, ANCO helped us with that, but reached out with to many of the carriers that would possibly be interested in this. So made sure, tried to be as get as much coverage as we could on this. At the present time, what came back and what we had was AIG, which is the current carrier, proposed a policy with similar limits and similar deductibles, as well as another one with an increased deductible. The increase in premium on the policy with basically the same limit, same deductible, is approximately, the old one was $72,723. The renewal, basically the same, is $77,538. They did give us an option as well to reduce the EPL retention, which basically deductible from $100,000 to $150,000, and that would decrease the premium about $7,000. It would not be our recommendation at this time to pursue that one. Our recommendation would be to go with the same limits, the same deductible at the $77,538.
So just a question about that difference between the 100,000 and the 150,000 ELP. What does that actually mean?
Well, that would mean that we would basically be on the hook for an additional $50,000 before the insurance would kick in on that. So you're risking an extra $50,000 to save about $7,300, somewhere in that range.
And is this a policy that we have to use often, or is this a backup? You know what I mean?
Well, and we've not had many claims in the most recent past, but we did have claims about 4 or 5, probably 6 years ago. And it is a potential claim. Basically, the way it works is if there's anything that is known by anyone in the district, it could go back that far. So, you don't know if there's a claim there or not at this point, and that would be coverage for that, so.
I get that.
Okay.
I move approval of AIG as Bryan ISD School Leaders Liability Insurance Carrier as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Harlan and a second by Ms. Binford. If there is no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries as moved.
Thank you.
Okay. And now we'll get down to discuss and consider approval of purchase requests over $50,000 for record scanning.
Okay, I got us there earlier.
More discussion on
Should have made that
records.
connection.
Good afternoon. I am here to just kind of answer some questions about this purchase request, and just let me start with a little bit of background. Right now, out at the Auxiliary Service Center, there's a big warehouse space that contains about 30 pallets of records that are graduate records, high school withdrawals, and then some miscellaneous things that aren't. The majority of them are graduates and high school withdrawals. And so knowing that that's the site for the intermediate school, and that we needed to get that it's in the cage, it's kind of fenced to keep it secure,
We've been working for probably a year and a half to figure out a way to progress through getting those records scanned. We have actually implemented where campuses now, the attendance clerk is scanning all of the attendance documentation that comes in, parent notes, substitute rosters, all that kind of information. So that keeps the amount of pallets that is coming out to the Auxiliary Service Center from increasing. We have also implemented, our campuses are now scanning student discipline records. And so that, again, keeps the volume of pallets from increasing. To try to whittle away at what is out there, we have hired temporary workers. We have tried hiring people in the summer, like employees that maybe are off during the summer. We've hired bus drivers, and it's just the volume is such that they cannot progress through it fast enough. And there's no way we could have all of that scanned by June 1st. So I thought, okay, how else can we tackle this? And so we reached out to companies that do bulk scanning. And so we got proposals from 3 or 4 vendors, and they range anywhere from over $200,000 to what we're bringing you today, which is a little over $87,000. And so the way this particular vendor works is they would come, inventory everything that we have out there, and then they would actually pick it up and take it off-site and scan it for us. And then they would be giving us a hard drive of those images to put into our Laserfish system. And so we have checked references for them, and they actually service a lot of school districts. And every school district we talked to said if we had more money, we would have them scan even more. They do a great job, and so I felt comfortable in bringing that forward to you all today. Can I answer any other questions for you?
I move approval of the contract with RCI Consultants, Inc. in the amount of $87,200 for the scanning of student records.
Second.
Have a motion by Ms. Dwayne and a second by Ms. Binford. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Any opposed? Motion carries as moved.
Thank you.
Okay, and that will take us down into our 2 items that were previously discussed. Item 1 is, or 5B1, discuss and consider approval of the revised 21-22 district calendar.
And again, this is switching the date of November 19th from a partial early release date to a full professional development date.
I'll move approval of the revised 2021-2022 district calendar as presented.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Stasny and a second by Ms. Binford. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries as moved. And then item 5B2, discuss and consider approval of the revised 21-22 Bryan Collegiate High School calendar.
And again, the same date, November 19th, from a partial early release day to a full professional development day.
I move approval of the revised 2021-2022 Bryan Collegiate High School calendar as presented.
Second.
I'm sorry, that was
Me.
Dr. Harlan. Okay. Have a motion by Ms. Waller and a second by Dr. Harland. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries as moved. The board will now convene in closed session to discuss the following items as allowed by Texas Government Code Chapter 551.074 and 551.072. No voting will take place in closed meeting. Any action the board wishes to take as a result of discussion in closed session will take place after the board reconvenes in the open meeting. It is now 1:19.
let me get them out here.
We got enough?
We got enough. Board reconvened in open session at 1:44. No action was taken in closed session. If there's no further business, we are adjourned.